Hello and welcome to my third video on my UnRaid journey. And it's a journey that has turned into a bit of a crusade. To address the unforeseen poor file transfer speeds that have occurred across my Mac and my NAS. And it seems the fault lies at the feet of Apple, not UnRaid. Now, in my limited experience of using my UnRaid Mac Pro 2009, which incidentally I bought off eBay for 99 quid, very happy, I have been quickly and rudely introduced to the Samba problems with Macs. Now, this video is going to go through some of the things I found out there since my last video, and how the latest macOS update, Sonoma 14.1.1, set everything that is awesome, back to running like garbage. This saga is not new. It's most definitely sounding like a broken record on repeat, given the numerous posts on forums I have found going back many years. Only thing is, I'm playing the same song by a different tune. And I hope the suggestions I'm going to give you in this video will help you navigate the Mac Samba minefield, so you can either avoid the regression or manage the shortcomings. Now, if this is your first visit to my channel and my Samba saga, and I'm not the only one, believe me, then let me quickly give you some context of why I built an unrated Mac Pro. Now, I make YouTube videos using Final Cut Pro and Mac Pro 2019. And as you can see, I'm currently using a Thunderbolt DAS as my primary storage for my Final Cut Pro projects and finished videos. Now, I want to replace that Drobo with a similar primary backup device. And this is why I started my journey of unraiding my Mac Pro and wanting to replace that Drobo with something similar. I have also, as you can see, a Mac Pro from 2009, and now that is acting as my secondary storage to that Drobo. It is effectively a NAS which duplicates everything on that Drobo, but it's not raided. Now, to be absolutely clear, there is nothing wrong with UnRaid itself or the Samba specification. It works fine. As I have found out, it is just Apple's poor implementation of it, maintenance of it, or maybe Apple's total disregard for it as to why file transfer speeds using Samba. It works, but it does so poorly out the box, as I quickly found out. Hence the constant patching and fixing by people in the community. Now, given the UnRaid performance and the Samba issues that I've had, that is the reason why that unrated Mac Pro in that diagram is no longer the planned Drobo replacement as you see. It's been relegated to third tier cold storage, and the reason for that is because I cannot browse and retrieve large Final Cut Pro projects quickly. And it is the Final Cut Pro projects that play a big part in the problem space that I have with Samba, as at the moment handling files of different sizes results in such a wide range of transfer speeds. But I do have a hack tip that can address this, and I will talk about that a little bit later. Now, in my previous video, I proclaimed everything was awesome. Everything is awesome with my UnRaid to Mac Pro setup. And it did what I expected with flying colours. That was until I installed macOS Sonoma update 14.1.1 a few weeks later. Now, about the same time, but I did not make that connection, I found some additional Mac Samba parameters with explanations of what I did. And so I thought, excellent, I can use these and move forward and see if I can make any improvements. So I set about incorporating them into my existing Mac Samba configuration file.
A little longer than a few minutes later.
About an hour later, during my testing of which parameters could be used to further improve my awesome setup, I quickly established a few things. Something, not sure, had regressed, and it had regressed quite badly. Several things, it seemed, were coming together to make the perfect storm. I thought to myself, what's going on here? What have I done? And why is my Mac suddenly just misbehaving? And I just had that sinking feeling, how do I unravel this? I had slow boots where the system would report there was a problem and had to start again. That was the first one. And during those numerous boots and editing of the Samba config file on the Mac, I started to twig that certain parameters seemed to be causing my Mac to crash on boot. I also realized that issuing certain Samba parameters in a certain order either allowed the Mac to boot okay, boot with a crash, or cause, bizarrely, any Mac to Mac shares to stop working. They just wouldn't appear in Finder, and that is really unusual. I've never had that before. And to add to the weirdness of what was happening, a further insult to injury was my Mac kept insisting on changing its network name, even though that network name didn't exist on the network. Drag-dropping Final Cut Pro projects to the UnRaid Mac Pro were now extremely slow to transfer, back to square one, but I did notice single large files were still transferring quite quickly, and I will talk a little bit more about that a little bit later. Now my everything is awesome opening large file directories with lots and lots of files, that had just disappeared, broken. It just went back to processing. So I sat there saying to myself, what has happened? What has caused this abrupt change in behavior? Why is my Mac behaving badly? And I came to the conclusion after much editing and Samba config changes and rebooting that Sonoma 14.1.1 seemed to be the root of my problems. It seemed to line up with what, the time frame that I was working with. To prove this theory, there was some combination or link between the samba.config file and Sonoma 14.1.1. I removed the Mac Samba config file completely. And yes, my Mac Pro booted fine. It had absolutely no issues. However, I couldn't leave it in that state because that means I would be returning to a very poor Samba performance scenario. So I put the Samba file back in with the correctly ordered parameters, bizarrely, and I regained some Samba performance, but not like what I had before installed Sonoma 14.1.1. And so this is where I am at the moment. It's working, but it's not working as best as it could be. Now, some of you may notice previously, and in my current UnRaid Samba configuration files, there are parameters beginning with fruit or vs_fruit. These parameters are, from the small amount of research I've done, are extensions of the Samba specification to enhance Mac OS X and NetTalk interoperability. But as yet, I do not fully appreciate their functionality, but I hope to improve on that in the near future. So for the moment, I'm using fruit Samba parameters like some of the other Samba parameters where I believe they could add value to the Mac Samba setup, but I'm not certain of it. As there are so many parameters in the config files between the UnRaid system and the Mac, the permutations and combinations are a little bit bewildering at the moment, but I'm confident I can work them out in the end, and I hope you'll join me on this saga journey so we can get to the bottom of this. As I've just found out, the order of issuing those parameters also plays a part in that combination and permutation of infinite possibilities. So with that correct, I will leave you now with the Samba config file in the description below, so have a look, along with any links to my previous Mac Samba videos for you to have a look at. Now, I'm not going to go back to the previous version of macOS, so what am I going to do going forward? Well, I'm going to work around the Samba issues with some different approaches on how to transfer speeds efficiently across the network to make the best of the situation right now. And it's these tips I'm hoping will help you too. As I've already mentioned, I use a lot of Final Cut Pro projects, and they're made up of thousands of files in one big folder in the disguise of a project. You see, I noticed that when copying Final Cut Pro projects of notable size to the UnRaid Mac Pro, it would start off very, very slowly, indicating it would take days to transfer. But if I left it there and left it to its own devices, that file transfer speed would speed up as it got towards the end of the transfer, indicating hours instead. And the reason I found out for this increase in speed is because currently Samba prefers transferring large files, large single files, not thousands of little itty-bitty files. And incidentally, as I found out in my research, this is one of the reasons why any time machine set up as a NAS is extremely slow, because the time machines take system files, lots of little ones, and tries to transfer them across the network, hence the reason they're slow. So it's not a good idea, apparently, to put a Mac time machine on a NAS across a network. And if you want to see some of the background information I found on that, a very interesting article I found by the electric light company, Death by Samba. They published an article in 1921, and it talks about slow Samba speeds then, and that it's not a new problem either. And they came across and mentioned this time machine issue. This is rather annoying that I've invested time and money in my NAS setup. Now, I say invested because while I haven't really spent that much money, I'm now starting to invest time into how to fix this scenario like so many other people. I'm just glad I did not fork out hundreds, maybe thousands of pounds on a Synology or a QNAP NAS to find out this problem after the fact. Anyway, back to testing the large file theory by copying a very large video file to the UnRaid system. On drag drop, that file transferred across the network at full bandwidth in minutes. Most excellent, a step forward in the right direction. So my first recommendation is zip up or compress your Final Cut Pro video projects into a single file and store them on your UnRaid NAS. This will make transferring them back to your Mac very, very fast as your network or destination drive will allow. Now, if you already have a few Final Cut Pro projects on your UnRaided NAS, say from a previous rsync, then you can copy them back one at a time. Now, if you open up a terminal window on your UnRaid system, locate the Final Cut Pro project or folder in UnRaid's case, and just run the zip command on that folder, then you can copy that Final Cut Pro zipped project back to your Mac. This will be a hell of a lot faster than the drag dropping of the original Final Cut Pro project. As a bonus, with zipping up Final Cut Pro projects, as I've found, if you've got them on your NAS and you wish to delete it using Mac Finder, that is extremely quick too. Bizarrely, I've learnt not to delete a Final Cut Pro project on my UnRaid NAS from my Mac. That can take just as long as it would to copy it over in the first place. It just doesn't make sense, but there you go. Or you can just use UnRaid's file manager to delete the project for you. I also have an alternative to zipping up projects or moving folders across as I've just described, and I call it teleporting. To teleport, you create a teleport directory, one on the Mac, one on the UnRaid NAS. Copy any files you want to transfer into the source teleport directory, then use rsync to teleport the contents to the destination teleport directory, all using the same one generic rsync command. I plan to make a video on this approach in a future video, but for now, that should give you the gist of what it's about. Next up, my second recommendation is to maybe use an UnRaid disk share, then mount that disk share on your Mac. Now, a disk share is an alternative method to the more common array share that you would normally use on your UnRaided NAS. The difference between the two is that a disk share does not use fuse, whereas the normal array share does. And apparently, bypassing fuse allows file transfers to be carried out at full bandwidth speed or destination drive speed. So I gave this a try, and yes indeed, my Final Cut Pro project, by just dragging and dropping across onto that disk share, worked as you would hope it would do in absolutely no time at all. However, there is a downside to using a disk share. It only shares one physical device or drive, not an array of devices, so you're limited to the capacity of that drive, even if it forms part of the array. So it may not be suitable for everyone. My third recommendation is to have a look at the UnRaid forum and the thread I have set up there. I will leave a link to it in the description below. Now, that thread is called the optimal Samba settings to use with an UnRaid with a Mac. I want to bring together in one place everyone's optimal Samba settings. The aim then is to see if there can be some common settings or setups that can be extrapolated that will work for everyone. I would like to take the opportunity to thank people who have already contributed to that thread. I'm hoping we can get at some point in time, sooner rather than later, where Samba is a non-issue. That seems like a tough order. And as I alluded to, and I have experienced, Samba can work properly at full speed. That experience has been exceptional, and I want it back. It feels a bit like that Nexus Star Trek Generations film, where I've experienced the Nexus and I just want to go back, and I'll do anything to get back there. So do have a look at that forum thread if you can, but please only put positive findings so we can keep it brief and concise and make it a quick lookup. So my conclusion, And to wrap this video up, the saga continues. In the very small amount of time I spent getting an optimum Mac Samba setup, where I did it relatively quickly, I've also got burnt quite badly by making new changes, whether that be the macOS system itself. And Apple is not helping here. Like with many other people in the past, it seems like a case of managing Samba as best as you can, finding alternative ways to use your NAS by bypassing Samba altogether. And at the moment, my UnRaid Mac Pro NAS is still in a testing phase. It hasn't really been brought online. So when I do bring my unrated Mac Pro online, I will still be going ahead and using rsync as the primary method to duplicate my files. The main thing from this experience and going forward is to gain sufficient knowledge to keep Samba working efficiently enough to allow rudimentary file browsing. And like I said before, this is not what I expected when I got my first non-macOS NAS. And I do wonder if there's a level of mis-selling going on when it comes to using NASs as a solution for mass storage for the Mac community. I mean, how many other people who have brought Synologies or QNAP NASs, money changed hands, only to find that their experience is not really going to be a good one? Let me know down in the comments if you've been stuck in this same situation and how you're getting yourself out of it. If you found this video useful, please hit that like button, as this tells YouTube you liked it. I know you liked it because you've watched this far. The saga continues, and when I get to improve the lackluster in performance, I'll let you know. And as part of that investigation, I'm going to be looking at more into the VS Fruit specification, so keep tuned. So do hit that subscription button, turn on notifications to ensure you do not miss the next episode and what looks like an unexpected series of events. Anyway, I'll catch up with you guys later. Bye.